There was a man a long time ago who moved rocks other people couldn't move, not dramatically, not with a big grunt and a crowd cheering, just casually, the way you'd move a chair that was slightly in your way. Boulders that took 3 grown adults, straining, cursing, and eventually giving up, this one man would walk over to, adjust his grip once, and lift like it was mildly inconvenient furniture. His camp noticed, obviously. It's hard not to notice the person quietly relocating a rock the size of a sheep. For a long time, nobody had an explanation. He wasn't the biggest man in the group, wasn't the tallest, didn't train more than anyone else as far as anyone could tell. He was just stronger, inexplicably, consistently, every single day in a way that didn't seem to fully add up. So today we're doing something a little different. We're going to go through every normal explanation for this, one at a time, and eliminate them until only the strange one is left standing. Let's start ruling things out. The obvious first guess is training. Maybe he simply worked harder than everyone else, carried more, practiced more, built strength the same way anyone builds strength: repetition, effort, time. This is a completely reasonable theory. And ancient humans absolutely did build serious functional strength through daily physical labor. Hunting, hauling, building, carrying. This was a species that got strong simply by living. But here's the problem with training as the full explanation. Training produces strong people. It doesn't produce people who lift dramatically more than everyone else in their group, despite doing roughly the same daily work. If hard work alone explained it, half the camp should have been just as strong. Everyone was doing physically demanding labor every single day. Nobody else was walking off with boulders. Something else was going on. Training built a floor. It didn't explain a ceiling this high. Suspect 1, eliminated. Not innocent exactly, just not sufficient on its own. Next theory. Maybe it was food. Perhaps he simply ate more meat, more protein, more of whatever ancient nutritional advantage existed at the time. Better fuel, better output. Simple as that. Diet absolutely affects strength. This isn't in dispute. A well-fed hunter-gatherer with consistent access to protein is going to outlift a malnourished one every time, but this explanation runs into the exact same wall as the training theory. Diet within a small, shared community tends to be relatively similar. Everyone's eating from the same hunts, the same gathered food, the same seasonal availability. If diet alone explained this level of difference, you'd expect to see it show up gradually, across multiple people, not concentrated entirely in one individual, while everyone around him, eating largely the same food, stayed completely ordinary. One person wildly outperforming an entire group that shared his exact food supply. Diet doesn't explain a gap that specific. Suspect 2, eliminated. Here's a theory that deserves real consideration because it's usually correct. Maybe none of this actually happened the way it sounds. Maybe this is simply what happens to stories. Someone was moderately strong, and over generations of retelling around a fire, moderately strong became impossibly strong, the way every fish gets bigger every time the story gets told again. This is a completely fair thing to suspect. Exaggeration is one of the most reliable forces in human history, but this is where the physical evidence actually gets involved. Archaeologists studying ancient skeletal remains can measure something called bone robusticity. Essentially, how thick, dense, and reinforced a bone became in response to serious repeated physical stress. Muscle doesn't just pull on bone, it reshapes it over a lifetime, leaving a permanent physical record of exactly how much force that body was regularly generating. In certain documented cases, researchers have found skeletal remains with muscle attachment sites and bone density dramatically beyond what normal, even heavily active, ancient life would typically produce, which means this isn't only a story anymore. In at least some cases, the bones themselves are testifying. Suspect 3, eliminated. This wasn't just exaggeration. Something real happened here, which leaves us with the strange one. The one nobody in that camp could have possibly understood, a genetic mutation. Specifically, one involving a gene responsible for producing a protein called myostatin. Here's what myostatin normally does. Think of it as your body's built-in brake pedal for muscle growth. Everyone has it. It exists specifically to stop muscles from growing indefinitely, keeping growth within a controlled, sustainable range. Now imagine that brake pedal comes with a manufacturing fault. It doesn't fully work. Muscle growth continues with dramatically less restriction than normal. This isn't science fiction. This is a real, documented, studied genetic condition. Researchers have identified confirmed human cases, including a well-documented case involving a child born with dramatically increased muscle mass and strength from birth, directly linked to a mutation affecting this exact gene. The same underlying mechanism has been identified and deliberately studied in cattle and dogs, producing animals with visibly, dramatically greater muscle mass than others of their species. Nobody in an ancient camp had any concept of genes, mutations, or proteins. All they had was undeniable, repeated, physical proof standing in front of them, quietly moving boulders like furniture. They didn't need to understand the mechanism to recognize that something about this person was fundamentally different. And this is where it gets genuinely fascinating, because a mutation like this wouldn't have stayed private for long. In many ancient and traditional societies, individuals with extraordinary, unexplainable physical traits weren't quietly ignored. They were noticed, talked about, often treated as something between remarkable and slightly unsettling. Some would have been valued enormously. Protection, heavy labor, hunting large or dangerous animals, all suddenly easier with someone this capable in the group. Others might have been regarded with real caution. Ancient humans were pattern-based thinkers, and a person who broke every known pattern for how strength was supposed to work would have been difficult to fully explain, and difficult things tend to attract both fascination and unease in equal measure. Either way, one thing is certain: nobody in that camp forgot him. Stories like this one don't survive by accident. They survive because someone saw something they had no framework to explain and made absolutely sure it got repeated. Here's the part that makes this a lot harder to dismiss as one weird story. This exact mutation, the same broken brake pedal on the same gene, has shown up again, multiple times, in multiple species, completely independently. Cattle breeders noticed it first, generations ago, in a breed now known specifically for it. Animals with visibly, dramatically more muscle than any other cow around them, built almost entirely because of this one genetic quirk. Then it turned up again in dogs, a small number of documented whippets, born into otherwise completely normal litters, with noticeably more muscle mass than every one of their litter mates. Same gene, same fault, same result, in an entirely different species that has never once met a cow, which means whatever happened to that ancient man wasn't a fluke unique to him. It was a mutation the universe apparently keeps rediscovering, in cattle, in dogs, in the rare human case documented in a modern laboratory. The same broken switch, flipped independently, over and over, across completely unrelated branches of the animal kingdom. He wasn't a one-off mistake. He was one entry in a very short, very strange list that keeps writing itself, species after species, without any of them coordinating at all. And here's why none of this stayed theoretical for very long. Picture the moment it actually counted. A rockfall, maybe, sealing off the entrance to shelter during a storm. Or a boulder blocking the only clear path during a hunt, with predators closing in and no time to find another route. In an ordinary group, that's a full crisis. Multiple people straining, shouting instructions at each other. Precious minutes disappearing while the danger gets closer. In this group, it wasn't. One person walks over, braces, lifts the exact obstacle that would have taken 4 others and several minutes they didn't have. Problem solved, in the time it took everyone else to start panicking. Moments like that don't just get noticed. They get remembered deliberately on purpose, specifically so nobody in the group ever forgets who to stand next to when the next crisis shows up. This is very likely how someone like this stopped being just unusually strong and started being something the entire group quietly built their sense of safety around. So here's where the elimination actually ends: not training, not diet, not exaggeration alone, a genetic fault in a single gene that happened to land in exactly the right place to override one of the body's own internal limits. And here's the number that puts this whole thing into perspective. Confirmed, medically documented human cases of this specific mutation worldwide in recorded history, fewer than a handful, which means what that ancient man was carrying wasn't common even once civilization had microscopes, laboratories, and genetic sequencing. He had it with absolutely none of that. No explanation, no name for it, no idea ever why his body simply refused to stop, just a rock, lifted like furniture, and an entire camp that never quite forgot what they saw. Slow down, think a little.